Wspieraj kanał magazynu Układ Sił na Patronite. Link do wsparcia znajdziesz w opisie filmu.
Hello everyone, I'm Maksymilian Skrzypczak from Układ Sił, Balance of Power, a Polish geopolitical magazine and think tank. And today I'm pleased to be joined by Chuck Freilich, Israeli expert on international security. Hello.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Today we'll be talking about the ongoing war in the Middle East. And firstly, I would like to ask you a more general question. Are you satisfied with how the war against Iran is currently going on for Israel?
No, I'm not satisfied with how things are going. On a purely military level, things have gone very well. Both Israel and the United States have hit Iran very, very hard and degraded their capabilities very significantly. But at the same time, the Iranians have successfully used the oil weapon to disrupt international oil and financial markets. And that has put a great deal of pressure on President Trump, both the domestic American pressure and international pressure, to end the war quickly, maybe before we've achieved the objectives. And I mean, some of the objectives, I must say, I think were questionable to begin with. Toppling the regime was going to be very, very hard in the best of circumstances. And we would certainly need more time to achieve that objective if it's at all possible. But the objectives of degrading their military capabilities have been achieved successfully so far.
All right, so let me follow up on that, because you said that the goal of regime change was questionable from the beginning, but many people wonder if this war ends with the Islamic Republic still in place, what's the aftermath? Is Israel doomed to some kind of violent maintenance or forever war with Iran, and it's just a matter of time when we will have another round and another round in the Middle East?
Well, of course, it would be a shame if the Islamic Republic is still there, but it looks like there's a good chance that that will happen. And yes, there may be a need for further rounds. It's not a question of what Israel wants to do, it's what Israel has to do. The Islamic Republic has called for Israel's extermination ever since it was established 47 years ago. And it has put billions and billions of dollars into this effort and produced vast quantities of weapons, which it has also given to its proxies, Hezbollah and Hamas, the Houthis. So it's not just talk on their part. It would be nice if we could dismiss it as extreme rhetoric, but it isn't. I think they're very serious about it. We also know from captured documents from Hamas after the war broke out that actually they Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran had a strategy in place, which was the war was supposed to lead to Israel's destruction now, okay, in the short term. Not we had always thought that Iran had some sort of long-term strategy for 2 or more decades, a few decades down the line. It turns out that they believed that they could have done it now. And for reasons that I don't quite understand, they didn't join in when Hamas started the war. Hamas was actually trying to force their hand and to force them to join. And apparently they concluded that the timing was not opportune for them. But Iran is very, very serious about this, about Israel's destruction. They've got the nuclear program. So we've set it back. If we have to set it back again in the future, we'll do so.
What if this war ends with Iran still being run by Islamic radicals, and also the US finally pivots to Asia, as it has been wishing to do so for a long time, and it won't be as engaged in the Middle East as it is now. Do you think Israel can handle this Iranian challenge on its own, or perhaps it will need to form or cooperate with some regional coalition made, let's say, of Arab states? Do you think such a scenario is probable?
Well, of course, it's infinitely preferable from Israel's perspective if the U.S. is involved, because the U.S. has unique capabilities, of course, that nobody else does. Now, I do believe that the Arab states or the Gulf states, who had moved away from Israel in the last couple of years since the war in Gaza began, may rethink that policy after the war, because they know that Israel is here to stay and can't pivot to Asia or to anywhere else. So it will be a reliable ally from that point of view against Iran. And I think there are good prospects for an improvement in relations. But to do it without the U.S. will, of course, even with the Gulf states, then there's no replacement for the United States.
And with regards to this coalition, let me just tell you 3 potential problems. I'm curious how you would like to see them addressed by Israel. The first problem I see is the Palestinian cause and the emphasis of Arab states on Israel addressing the Palestinian cause somehow. The second problem would be that perhaps some of those Arab states would be less willing to confront Iran head-on, but would prefer to bandwagon, right, to appease Tehran and try to incorporate some of its demands, hoping that they would be spared. And also the third problem I see would be that perhaps Turkey would like to step in, and of course, if Turkey plays a larger role in the region, perhaps it would leave less room for Iran to throw its weight around, but at the same time, perhaps it could make it more difficult for Israel to form such a coalition with the Arab states if the new Sunni axis is formed. What are your thoughts?
I don't think Turkey is going to be the country that takes a leading or even just a particularly active role against Iran. And of course, the Palestinian issue is very much there, and it's a problem in Israel's relationships with the Gulf states. But in the way that they were willing to put the Palestinian issue aside a number of years ago, that's what enabled the breakthrough to the Abraham Accords, to the establishment of formal relations between the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain and Israel. And just days before the war with Hamas broke out in 2023, we thought that we were on the verge of an imminent breakthrough with the Saudis. They were willing to put the Palestinian issue aside at the time, not because they didn't care, but because they thought that their other interests outweighed it, and they didn't want to let the Palestinian issue get in the way. Maybe they won't go back quite as far as they were at the time, but in the end, the Iranian issue is an extreme threat for them, and it's been proven as such now. The Iranians have fired more missiles and drones at the Gulf states, especially the UAE, than they have at Israel. And so I do think there's a good chance that they will join, that the relationships will grow closer again after the war.
Are you happy with how Israel manages specifically the information dimension of the war?
No, I mean, that's an area where Israel has always been criticized for not doing enough, and this is probably another case. There's also a concerted effort, I believe, underway around the world, led by a number of the Arab states and maybe some of the Gulf states, to delegitimize Israel. And certainly in the West, Muslim populations in particular, not just, are conducting this effort to delegitimize Israel. And that's a very serious problem. And the war in Gaza greatly exacerbated it. And this will further contribute to that. So am I concerned? The answer is very much so. Israel can't live as an island unto itself. It's part of the West. It needs Western support. Its economy is tied up into the Western world in particular. But at the moment, there's a very difficult choice. Do you want to be popular, or do you want to defend your national security in the face of a severe and maybe existential threat? And in those circumstances, in the end, the decision is pretty clear.
So I asked this question to my previous Israeli guest, and also I gave this example how in the first day of the war, the IDF posted on Twitter, Israel has the right to defend itself. The first day of this war. Now, I know what do you mean. I know that in the case of Iran is true. Iran has spent half a century trying to destroy Israel. So to say that this is a war of some kind of aggression against Iran, it's nonsense. It's just, I like to say that it's a bit as like saying that landing of allies in Normandy was an aggression against Germany. But here's the thing. I may understand it, but an average person looks at it and thinks that Israelis are just so, audacious assholes. Pardon. Because, they fire projectiles at the sovereign nation and then claim right to self-defense. And there's very little effort, I think, from the Israeli government to try to frame those actions in the right context. So I like to say that Israelis are great at waging war, but they are terrible at talking about war. But maybe concerning the military dimension, there are reports that I saw today. I mean, those are not official information. Those are rumors from Israeli media that the IDF has huge internal problems due to overextension on something like 7 fronts, right? Gaza, West Bank, Iran, Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, Yemen. And also it's 2.5 years on a constant war footing. Do you think those rumors that the IDF has really big problems that could backfire along the lines, are they correct?
Unfortunately, it's not just rumors. The chief of staff said in the cabinet, I believe the day before yesterday, that the IDF is in danger of collapsing. And it's not just, of course, it's the overextension in so many fronts, but it's a shortage of manpower, which also stems from Israeli decisions. So that, for example, a few years ago, military service for men was shortened from three years to 30 months. And the IDF has been repeatedly asking the government to extend it back to the full 3 years. And you have to remember that today, the level of training that soldiers require it's not like in the old days where maybe you could give somebody a few days or a couple of weeks of training and that was it. Today, it's months and years even. So having the extra 6 months of productive time is very important. And then there's the whole issue, even greater problem, of the exemption from military service that the ultra-Orthodox have managed to secure for themselves. I would say extort for themselves, using the fact that they've been the political linchpin. No party has been able to form, just about no party has been able to form a coalition in recent decades without them. And so they managed to get this exemption from them. That would pretty much solve the IDF's manpower problems if that was changed. The Supreme Court issued a ruling saying that this is unequal treatment. The government must draft them, and the government keeps finding ways to postpone and postpone again. To my way of thinking, it's a moral outrage. It's now a strategic outrage. It used to be just a matter of principle. Now it's become a matter of hard security. Those are issues that the government can address and solve the problem. It won't make life easy for the armed forces, but it will make it much, much more manageable.
You referred to Eyal Zamir's words about possible IDF collapse, but I wonder how in practice would such a collapse look like? It would mean that the Israeli army would suddenly have to withdraw from Lebanon, or how would it look like in practice?
Well, I think he was trying to make a very clear statement to the government about just how severe the problem is. And so he used extreme language. And if he knew that it was going to be leaked, then maybe he would have used a different word. I don't know what collapsed means either, but it will certainly mean that maybe reservists will refuse to show up because some of them have done 400 and 500 days of service since October 7th. Not just one or two, lots of them, a significant percentage, and others have done 300 days. And these are people who have jobs. They very often have businesses of their own, and of course the toll on their family life is severe. So it can't go on forever. It's just exhausting in and of itself. But I think what it means is that the IDF will have to say, well, there are certain things we're sorry to the government and say, we can't do that. You're going to have to change your priorities. And tell us what you don't want us to do so that we can focus on the most important issues with less manpower.
Now, could you please tell me, what do you think are the feasible objectives of Israeli operation in Lebanon? Do you think Israel has the ability to, take and hold land in South Lebanon up until the Litani River? And do you think it's possible that such an operation, even if it ends in success, will actually dismantle the Hezbollah rocket fire towards Israel?
So first of all, it won't completely prevent Hezbollah rocket fire because they have ranges that are way longer than that piece of land. If Israel wanted to fully prevent their rocket fire, we'd have to go and occupy all of Lebanon. And nobody wants to do that. As a matter of fact, I don't think anybody really even wants to go as far as the Litani River. And that will probably be a temporary situation. And even so, maybe Israel will go and take it briefly and pull back and go again. I mean, maybe things like that. Going to the Litani, or most of the way to the Litani, is really to get the northern Israeli communities out of anti-tank range, anti-tank weapons and missiles, which have a 10-kilometer range, and it's just a direct fire right into the Israeli towns. So that's probably the primary objective, and to push some of their short-range rockets a little bit further out of range. That is achievable. That can be done. I very much hope that we do not intend to go back and hold southern Lebanon for a lengthy period of time. We've been there, we've done that. Israel did that for 18 years back in the 80s and 90s. It was not a happy experience. It was reasonably effective in terms of protecting the northern towns, but also we lost a lot of soldiers doing it in Lebanon. I have no doubt that the IDF is at least as aware of that as I am, and that leads to my hope that whatever we do there will be temporary, and that is necessary.
All right, so just to wrap up, I would like to ask one question about Gaza, because we are already, or almost half a year after the ceasefire was announced. Do you think, or also for the viewers who are not really familiar with the war in Gaza since the bombs stopped falling on a regular basis, what do you think is the current situation on the ground? And does the Israeli government have some sort of plan how to move forward on the Gaza front?
So there's pretty much a ceasefire. It's not 100%. There have been numerous violations, but overall it's holding. And the good news was that as part of the ceasefire agreement, we got all of our hostages back. That was very good news. I never believed that the second stage of the process, which included Hamas agreeing to dismantle its arms and step down as the governing body in Gaza, I never thought that that had virtually any chance of happening. And of course, at least so far, they've absolutely refused to do so. Now, unless they do so, then there's a limit to what Israel can do. It can pull back a little bit in Gaza, but Gaza is, as it is, it's about 8 to 12 kilometers wide, something like that. And Hamas is controlling just under half of it. We're controlling half of it. So could we move back a little bit? Yes, but there isn't much room for that. And we have to maintain some sort of military control there to make sure that October 7th can never happen again. Where I'm less satisfied with the government's policy is I don't think that they have any long-term strategy for how to address the Palestinian issue generally and how to address Gaza specifically. They just have a military solution. I'm hopeful that after the next elections, which have to be held by October at the latest, maybe we'll have a new government, a more centrist government, one which will, I hope, look for new solutions in a whole variety of areas.
But do you think there's anything constructive the Israelis can do in the half of Gaza approximately that they control? I don't know, for example, can they try to de-Hamasize this part of Gaza at least, or try to perhaps cooperate with or support certain groups in their part of Gaza that could then stand up to Hamas?
Well, the half that Israel controls has very few people in it. Almost the entire population of Gaza is in the half that's under Hamas control. There has been talk, I don't think anything has gone forward in this regard, of maybe beginning to rebuild some of the communities, physically rebuild the homes in the areas that are under Israeli control, and actually bring in civilians from the Hamas-controlled part. That's something that maybe could go ahead. Again, it hasn't started so far. The question is, for example, if there was a different government in office in Israel, whether they'd be willing to give the Palestinian Authority a greater role. This government has not been willing to do so. And the Palestinian Authority is not some sort of wonderful solution either. It's a rather ineffective government, even in the West Bank. So to think that they could take control in Gaza is probably not very realistic, but slowly over time, I think we could try and build up support for them, build up their capabilities, because I don't see any other alternative. All the talk about the international community stepping in was unrealistic to begin with, and nobody's going to send in armed forces into harm's way and try and take on Hamas and finish them off, which Israel didn't succeed in doing. So to be honest, I'm not very optimistic about what's going to happen in Gaza for the foreseeable future.
Right, so unfortunately we have to end on a pessimistic note, but at least I hope it was intellectually satisfying for our viewers. Thank you very much. My guest today was Chuck Freilich, Israeli security expert. Thank you.
Thank you.